Previously on Bush War. Task Force Zulu took Bridge 14 south of Luanda after an advance of 3,000 kilometers and weeks of bloody battles.
Wel, die hoofdoel was om die aanmars voor te sit. In daai stadium het ons geen inclinasie gehad om terug te trek nie. Ons was sterk op pad vorentoe.
But the soldiers operated in a twilight world of propaganda and secrecy.
We were lying to the world and also lying to the U.S. Congress about what we were doing in Angola.
And Soweto was part of the picture.
So Angola now, it was an open terrain for all of us. So I left Namibia and we went into Angola and joined Soweto there so that we were going to be trained.
Task Force Zulu were not the only South African soldiers in Angola at the end of 1975. In the east of the country, Battle Group X-Ray was flown into Silvaporto on their way to Luso. Battle Group Orange advanced to Malanji in order to threaten Luanda from the east. But another battle was raging in governmental assemblies around the world. The ragged curtain of secrecy finally fell apart in December when the SADF announced that 4 South Africans had been captured in the operational area. Johan Potgieter knew exactly where, Bridge 14, 700 kilometers north of the border. He had watched the little group driving straight into the jaws of the enemy.
En ek kon deur my teleskoop sien hoe hierdie ouens waai vir die panserkarre en aanry en die panserkarre was verstom. Hulle kon niks sê nie want die tiffies het nie 'n kaart of 'n radio nie. Hulle kom net 'n herwinning doen. En toe stop hulle in die vyandelike linie, nee, toe is hulle daar vriendelik versoek om uit te klim en hulle is toe weggevoer. Dit was snaaks, oorlog is snaaks.
The South African government did not find it funny in the least. On the 18th of December, 2 of the prisoners were presented to the media in Lagos. On the 29th, South Africans heard that 3 more soldiers had died in the operational area. In America, the CIA was fighting to retain support for the anti-MPLA effort. Congress and the Senate were increasingly opposed to the idea. In middle December, Senator Dick Clark and 2 colleagues proposed an amendment to an existing law which would cut off all further funding. Pik Botha's misgivings about American support for the war were confirmed in conversations on Capitol Hill. The ghost of Vietnam was present at every meeting.
En op hierdie manier het ek uitgekom by Harry Goldwater en Jesse Helms, daardie soort mense wat konservatiewe vriende van Suid-Afrika was. En Goldwater het my net reguit aangekyk en hy het vir my gesê, "This goddamn Kissinger declares wars all over the world. Our sons are sent there, they die and we never win a war. We are not going to support you."
John Stockwell headed up the CIA task force for Angola.
South Africa's interest in Angola was their own interest to stop the MPLA from gaining power, to stop the Cubans. But at a different level, they were delighted to become involved with the United States to seduce us into a situation of military involvement with them, which they hoped would eventually trap us in a position where we would have to publicly support them. This would commit us to overt support to their policies. The United States finessed this point and drew back and actually gave up and accepted a defeat in Angola rather than taking that step.
There was a change of policy in Washington. Congress was not interested in supporting what you might call long-distance engagement in a subtle kind of proxy balancing warfare that Kissinger and Ford had launched.
On the 19th of December 1975, the Senate passed the motion closing the money tap. 3 weeks later, Congress confirmed it. Foster summoned Pik Botha to his holiday home at Obos on the Cape Coast for an emergency meeting.
Die hele nag op die airplane het ek nou sit en argumente uitwerk oor waarom ons troepe onmiddellik moet terugtrek. En toe uiteindelik by Obos aangekom en daar het ons in sy sitkamer wat so op die see uitkyk gesit en hy het eerst aan die woord gestel, PV Botha. Ek was dan alles maar 'n ambassadeurtjie. En tot my verbasing het PV Botha toe gesê, hy stel aan die woord vir Marcus Blanc. En die het toe dadelik gesê dat hulle reken hulle troepe moet onttrek.
The troops in the field received the new orders with some cynicism.
Toe die skielike opdrag gekom het vir onttrekking, ons het verwag daar op 'n stadium so opdrag gaan wees. Ons het ons radio's gehad en The Voice of America het ons op hoogte gehou van wat aangaan. waar die Suid-Afrikaanse polisie terstond sê, daar is geen Suid-Afrikaanse troepe in Angola nie. Sit ons in sentraal Angola, ons sien amper die liggies van Luanda, en ons weet, ons het nou beklei dat die bissies bewe, en dan ontken hulle dit nog steeds.
The cabinet decided to wait for the result of a meeting of the Organization of African Unity in middle January in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Would they recognize the MPLA as the government of Angola, or would they insist on a government of national unity with the participation of all three parties, including UNITA and the FNLA? The withdrawal from Angola was halted.
Nadat die opdrag gegee is om te onttrek, het ons dit aanvaar, dis wat troepe doen. En na 'n halfdag is die opdragte gewysig en sê nee. Gaan terug, beset die stellings. Dit was 'n fout, gaan beset weer die stellings in die grond wat hulle gehad het. Toe sê ons, maar dis nie moontlik nie, want die vyand het agterkom ons onttrek, want daar strome vlugtelinge. En toe sê hulle nee, okay, gaan nou net halfpad terug.
Wat my die ergste getref het, was die vlugtelinge, die burgerlike bevolking, die vroue, die kinders. Die beeld wat ek in my lewe nooit sou vergeet nie, is 'n baie ou vrou wat op haar kop seker haar kosbaarste besittings in daai masjien gedra het. En dis al wat sy gehad het, wat langs die pad geloop het.
The OAU discussion ended in deadlock. 22 votes for recognizing the MPLA as the government, 22 for a government of national unity. The meeting adjourned with the matter still undecided.
Dit het vir ons baie verleentheid veroorsaak. Omdat hoe langer ons in Angola gebly het, hoe minder was die kans dat ons teenwoordigheid daar kon geheim hou.
Actually, the cat was long out of the bag. 3 South Africans captured during Operation Savannah were paraded at the OAU meeting. The rest of the world knew South Africa was involved. On the 14th of January, the cabinet decided that the troops had to withdraw.
Dit was my 'n onaangename taak om na Soweto toe te vlieg en vir hom te kon vertel dat die Suid-Afrikaanse regering besluit het dat ons nou moet onttrek. Dit was vir hulle 'n groot teleurstelling geweest, want soos ek gesê het, ons het 'n formidabele vennootskap opgebou en ons het 'n kameraadskap gehad wat ons nou nie mekaar graag in die steek wou gelaat het nie, maar nou ja, as die regering so besluit is dit anders.
The South African withdrawal started on the 23rd of January. For many soldiers, this was an all-time low.
Daai stadium was onthou, ek was 'n luitenant. My werk is om kanonne te skiet, dit was nie my oordeel nie, maar ek was teleurgesteld dat ons nie want ek kon sien hoe jag die ouens weg. Daar was geen weerstand nie. En ek was teleurgesteld dat ons hulle nie opgevolg het en finale bloedneus gegee het. So die troepe was negatief. Onthou, dit was nasionale dienspligtiges wat Desember maand moes uitklaar. Hierdie opdragte het lank na Kersfees gekom. Hulle moes al by die huis gewees het. Wat het nog erger gemaak het, is toe ons uiteindelik demobiliseer. Dit trek nou na die einde van Januarie. En ons is gestop diskant Grootfontein met die terugtrekking. En so 30 km buitekant Grootfontein moes ons wag tot donker, sodat die media nie hierdie skerminkels sien wat uit die bos uitkom met al hierdie Russiese lorries en groente lorries. Dit lyk nie naaste by soos 'n Suid-Afrikaanse kolonne, maar eerder soos 'n invalsmag van die Organisasie vir Afrika Eenhede. Uiteindelik het ons op die 21ste Februarie in Potchefstroom aangeland. Amper 2 maande nadat die troepe moes uitklaar, waarin ons vir die eerste keer as helde ontvang is. Daar was toe al reeds 'n nuwe inname, Januarie inname by Vierveld regiment, en hierdie ou manne kon toe met hulle skurwebaarde en hulle fris bolywe, wat 15 jaar ouer lyk as die jong rekrute, is hulle ontvang, en tot laat daai middag het daar sulke brokkies ou manne en rowers gesit, net sulke groot oë, wat die ou manne vir hulle oorlogstories vertel het en momente ons uitgedeel het. Dit was vir 'n baie mooi gebou.
In the course of February 1976, as the South Africans withdrew, the MPLA resumed control over Lobito, Benguela, and Sadabandera. Under their wing, SWAPO found a foothold directly north of the border. Some commentators see March 76 as the real beginning of the war, which would only end with the independence of Namibia. SWAPO insurgents into Namibia gained serious momentum, which meant that South Africa became increasingly involved. UNITA leader Jonas Savimbi had anticipated that when Constant Viljoen informed him of the withdrawal.
Natuurlijk was hy uitermate teleurgesteld geweest. Maar hy het gesê ons sal mekaar weer ontmoet en ons het mekaar weer want dit was nie lank daarna nie, wat duidelik was vir ons dat die USSR Cuba geïnspireerde internasionale kommunistiese oorname in Angola besig was om plaas te vind. En ons het toe besluit om weer beperkte steun aan UNITA, veral UNITA te gee.
While international politics determined events in Angola and Namibia, school children in South Africa took matters into their own hands. On a cold winter's morning in June 76, rebellion erupted in Soweto. Soon it engulfed the whole country. The intensity of the protest and the ferocity of the police reaction shocked everyone. Debate raged in the churches.
I believe that the time has come for the churches to call for civil disobedience, for instance. If we believe as churches, as my own church, it said last year, apartheid as a system is contrary to the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Anton van Niekerk was a chaplain in the Defence Force.
Daar was enkele figure in die kerk wat 'n baie belangrike rol gespeel het in die sogenaamde struggle, waarvan Tutu en Boetsak en 'n bekende kardinaal van die Romeinse kerk en so Franciszekani en ander prominente figure was. Maar die instituties, die kerke self, selfs die Rooms-Katolieke kerk, was baie huiwerig om amptelik as instituties sterk standpunte in te neem.
And from within the Christian community came harsh reaction against conscientious objectors.
Maar die Raad van Kerke was nie, dit was 'n bietjie van 'n ander soort liggaam geweest. Dit is 'n baie meer radikale soort van 'n liggaam onder leiding van waarskynlik op daai stadium Beyersnodee of Tutu of een van die figure wat dikwels standpunte ingeneem het wat ek dink heel wat verder gegaan het as wat die deelnemende kerke in hulle amptelike hoedanighede ooit bereid was om te gaan.
The wave of resistance surging across the country from the townships created doubt in the white community.
I was basically in Standard 9 at the time of 1976. It was the first year of TV, and they made the mistake of broadcasting what the police were doing in the country at the time. And I saw what was happening, and I realized then that I wouldn't be going into the SADF, and I would need to make some plans. What they were going to be, I had no idea.
When I left school, I'd already taken the decision that I wasn't going to go into the army. And so I did a business degree because I felt that would give me greater opportunities if I left the country, which I thought I probably would do.
Among Afrikaners, there was little resistance.
Die Afrikaanse kerke was volledig teen dienspligweiering. Hulle het dit so sterk as moontlik ontmoedig. Ek dink daar was baie min jong Afrikaners wat diensplig geweier het. En dit bly, ek dink vir my geslag as ons daarop terugkyk, dit bly 'n vraagteken oor baie van ons. Ek dink oor myself ook. Terselfdertyd moet 'n mens weet dit is 'n ongelooflike omwenteling in jou lewe wat dit sou meebring. Jy sou of die land moes verlaat, of jy sou bereid moes wees om vir 6 jaar in die tronk te gaan sit. En nou ja, vir iemand aan die begin van sy lewe was dit dit is 'n geweldige ding.
Sal 9 kom die oproepgoeders, papiere, en jy moet onthou ek is grootgemaak soos meeste Afrikaanse kinders, Afrikaanse huis. Met ander woorde, die Nasionale Party was die party waarvoor jy stem. Daar was moeilike Engelse wat probeer kak veroorsaak in die land. Van hulle was kommuniste, en hulle wou alles wegvat wat ons het. So daar was nooit in my huis ooit kwessies gewees van was dit reg of verkeerd om na die army toe te gaan nie. Dit was die natuurlike progressie.
A decision to oppose the system often grew from a personal relationship with black compatriots. Anton Eberhard did his first 9 months of conscription in 1970, immediately after school.
And it was in the Engineers Corps, based at Kroonstad and then Bethlehem. And we hardly ever left camp, so in fact we did things like learn to build Bailey bridges and fairly innocuous things like that.
As a student at the University of Cape Town, he made black friends, and that changed his attitude radically.
I remember one long weekend, I wanted to visit Fuzi, my friend's family, and they were in a black township in Mooi River, and so we wanted to take the train together. And of course, first and second class were for whites. Blacks could only travel third class, so we wanted to travel together. I travelled third class. but I had to be hidden, wrapped in a blanket on the top bunk to prevent from being thrown off the train by the ticket conductor.
On leaving university, Anton and Vusi shared a house in Johannesburg. The Soweto riots brought things to a head for Anton.
I mean, I remember the Rand Daily Mail newspaper headline, Soweto burns. And within a very short time that the police had killed more than 200 school kids. And we were directly affected. We got involved. I think we were doing literacy classes at the time. Obviously, the whole schooling system collapsed that year. And then also helping some of the kids get out of the country. So a number deciding then to join the ANC, to join MK, and providing safe houses and transit routes for them. In '77, we had the banning of all the black consciousness movements. My friend Vusi then was also detained at that time. And that's when I got my first call-up for an army camp. It was early '77. And in that context, then it seemed impossible that I could then face my friends in uniform. So it seemed an obvious choice not to go. The question then was whether to evade, which I didn't want to do, to kind of be in that twilight life zone where you had to always be changing addresses. I didn't want to go into exile, and so the only other option seemed to be refuse. So I wrote a letter to my commanding officer telling him that I wasn't going to come. I said, I acknowledge receipt of your call-up papers, but must inform you that for reasons of conscience I am unable to attend. I've given the matter much thought and am fully aware of the consequences of refusing. It's my belief that the present government has no right to remain in power, and any organisation which enables it to do so cannot be supported. Then nothing happened for quite some months, so I thought that luckily I'd got away with it. But then the military police did arrive on my doorstep about 6 months later.
The only people who refused conscription at that point were Jehovah's Witnesses, and everyone knew the consequences.
Baie ouetjies was baie bang om diensplig te weier hoor. Want daar het van daai ouens in die tronk gesit, in die DB gesit. Om vir 2 jaar in die tronk te sit, jy weet, selfs al is dit nie DB, en selfs al kan hulle jou nie dwing om die vloer te vee of om die perskebome te gaan water lei nie. Jy weet, dan jy weet, jy moet toch al oortuig wees dat jy gaan 2 jaar daar sit hoor.
Anton Eberhard was the first conscientious objector with a political motive. At his court case, he had no organised support.
It was in a magistrate's court. Certainly my family were there, my parents, I think my sister. It was pretty much a clear case in law. I wasn't going to go, and I think the magistrate had to give a particular sentence. I guess the only unusual thing was that 10 months of that sentence was suspended. I was then taken by military police by train from Port Elizabeth up to Withdrawal in Pretoria. I was chained. I was handcuffed to the bunk that whole journey, which for the first time sort of realised I was now incarcerated in some way.
At military bases, people were detained in detention barracks, generally known as the DB.
En dit is 'n plek wat geblink het, jy weet, en die ouens daar, as jy kyk sien daai DB is, dan het jy gebars. Maar daar was baie van daai ouetjies van die Jehovah getuies wat by die hek gesit het. En ons het met die Bedford gestop en hulle gevra om die hek oop te maak, en die een ouetjie het vir ons sê, ek maak nie 'n hek voor 'n militêre voertuig oop nie. Ek het baie respek vir daai ouens, want hulle het swaar gekry, dink ek.
I mean, it wasn't a pleasant place to be, because I think the whole philosophy of detention barracks is to impose sort of verbal and physical abuse. You know, so it's there for people who have either been on AWOL or have committed some other crime or have disobeyed orders in some way. So the ordinary military system hasn't been able to deal with them, so they end up in detention barracks. And then the whole philosophy is was verbal abuse, shouting, physical abuse, getting people to do punishment drills with heavy packs, etc. But also vice versa. So there were 2 breakouts, very violent breakouts, when I was there, of pick handles being smuggled into the cells, and then when being opened up in the morning, military police being beaten unconscious.
Anton Eberhard doesn't think he had a really hard time compared to some of his contemporaries.
There was a period when then the military intelligence and the security branch came to see me a number of times, because, as I say, my friend Vuzi was detained at the equivalent period for other reasons. Was in Johannesburg Fort. So and then immediately after those interviews, I was again in solitary for short periods, but never did they take my books away. So, and as I say, it was also a very relatively short period. So I think I got off quite lightly, certainly compared to the people who then came after me. So Peter Moll, Richard Steele had much longer periods. Billy Paddock, Charles Yates.
Anton was the first political objector. In time, the numbers grew and a support group took shape.
I was 77, Peter was 79, I think Richard Steele in 1980. And then you started seeing something of a movement growing around this. Conscientious Objector Support Group was formally constituted. We ran a counselling service for conscripts who were faced with call-ups, and advised them on their various options, from refusing, what are the consequences of jail.
The friendship between 2 young men, one white and one black, formed the seed for a whole campaign, which would become a thorn in the side of the authorities.
At one stage, Magnus Bolan said that the South African apartheid government faced 4 threats. First, the South African Communist Party. Second, Umkhonto we Sizwe. Third, the ANC. And fourth, the End Conscription campaign. And when he said that, we knew we were doing something right.
Next up on Bush War.
It is not a military. It is something medieval.
It's not professional. A professional soldier, you fight. If somebody's killed, you honor, even if they are dead.
Wel, ek is 'n professionele soldaat, jy sien. Dus my motiveer. Ek moet nou maar bekendnis maak. Ek het nie geveg vir volk en vaderland. Want ek met baie dikwels met volk en vaderland saamgestem nie. Ek het 'n opdrag gekry. Ek wil die beste infanterie eenheid nie in die land nie, maar in die wêreld.